Hello students, myself is Parminder Singh from Prab Kirpa classes. Our today's topic is the fundamental unit of life. In this course, we will discuss why the cell is called the structural and functional unit of life. We will also see what is cell made up of and what is the structural organization of a cell. Further, if the organization of a cell is destroyed due to some physical or chemical influence, what will happen? We will also find out the difference between unicellular and multicellular organisms. Then we will find out what is the shape and size of cells. Then what is the meaning of division of labor in multicellular organisms. Then how do the substances move in and out of the cell? Next, eighth question, what would happen if the plasma membrane ruptures or breaks down? Then why plasma membrane is called a selectively permeable membrane, and what is the meaning of diffusion and osmosis? And another important question, what happens when a plant cell is placed in hypertonic, hypotonic and isotonic solution? Next, what is the meaning of mitosis and meiosis and much more? Discovery of the cell. Robert Hooke was a great scientist. He discovered the cells in 1665. He had designed a microscope himself. You can look at the picture of the microscope he had designed. He looked at the slice of cork through this microscope. What he found after looking at the cork, he discovered that the cork looked like the structure of a honeycomb. That is, the cork was some type relating to the structure of a honeycomb. He found that the cork was made up of a large number of tiny compartments or boxes, and each box was separated from the other by a wall or partition. You can see here that this is the cell structure of the cork, and you can see here that these are the small pores or compartments, and there is a wall in between each of these tiny compartments. He called these tiny compartments or boxes as cells. His observations are recorded in his book Micrographia. Next is cell theory. The credit for developing the cell theory is usually given to two scientists, Sladen and Schwann, while there is also the name of another scientist known as Virchow, who contributed to the cell theory, but he is not as credited for his stuff towards it. Now, there are three basic components of the cell theory. What are those basic components? First is, all living organisms are composed of one or more cells. Second basic component of cell theory is that the cell is the basic unit of life in all living organisms. And the third basic component of cell theory is that all cells arise from pre-existing cells. Now, a question arises, why cell is called the structural and functional unit of life? The word cell is derived from the Latin word cellula, which means a little room. All living organisms can be divided into two types, unicellular organisms and multicellular organisms. In case of unicellular organisms, they are also known as single-celled organisms. That is, a single cell provides the structure for the body, and the single cell performs all the functions that take place inside the body of the organism. All these functions include digestion, excretion, etc. In the case of multicellular organisms, there are multiple cells in the body, and the examples of multicellular organisms are plants, animals, human beings. In the case of multicellular organisms, the number of cells vary from species to species. It is approximated that the human body contains trillions of cells. Sorry. In case of multicellular organisms, cells form the structure of the organism. You can see here that the cells form the structure of the organisms. A bunch of cells working together form the tissue, and a bunch of tissues working together form the organ, and a bunch of organs working together form the organ system, and the organ system further combines to form the organism. The examples of tissue is nervous tissue, example of organ is brain, example of organ system is organ nervous system. The cells in multicellular organisms vary in size and shape depending upon the function they perform. All the functions which take place inside the body of the multicellular organisms, all these functions are performed by the cells. Now, the question arises, what are unicellular organisms? A unicellular organism is also known as single-celled organisms. That is, there is only single cell present in a unicellular organism, and all the life processes such as reproduction, feeding, digestion, excretion occur in one cell only. There are some examples of unicellular organisms which are bacteria, protozoa, amoebas, unicellular fungi, etc. Amoeba has no definite shape. It keeps on changing its shape. A white blood cell which is present in the human body is another example of a single cell which can change its shape. So we observe that amoeba can change its shape, and at the same time a white blood cell which is present in the human body can also change its shape, but it does not mean that WBC, that is white blood cell, is also a unicellular organism. White blood cell defends the body against infection and disease. But while WBC is a cell, amoeba is a full-fledged organism which is capable of independent existence. Now, multicellular organisms. You here can see the photographs of beautiful multicellular organisms. These are the four pictures of different multicellular organisms. Multi means many, cellular means cells. It means that there are many cells present in the multicellular organisms. All the species of animals, land plants, and most fungi are multicellular. Now the question arises, how many cells are present in a multicellular organisms? The number of cells which are present in the multicellular organisms may range from a few to many billions. The number of cells being less in smaller organisms does not mean that it affects the functioning of the organisms. All the cells which are present in the multicellular organisms work in coordination with one another for the proper functioning of the organism. It is to be noted that the lifespan of a unicellular organism is short because all the functions inside the body of the unicellular organism, that is excretion, digestion, etc., place within this single cell. So there is heavy workload on the cell. Due to this reason, the span of a single celled organism is short, whereas on the other side, the lifespan of multicellular organisms is longer because the different cells carry out specific functions. Now we will find out the difference between unicellular and multicellular organisms. First is number of cells. As we have discussed earlier, uni means one, cellular means cells. In case of unicellular organisms, organism consists of a single cell. Whereas in the case of multicellular organisms, as we have already told, there are multiple cells in a multicellular organisms which may range from a few to billions of cells. The next point is size. The size of the cell in the case of unicellular organisms is somewhat larger as compared to the cells in a multicellular organisms. Whereas in the case of multicellular organisms, the size of the cell is smaller. Now, the next point is functions. As the unicellular organism has a single cell in its body, all the functions which are necessary for the functions of the life, such as eating, reproduction, waste removal, moving, etc., are performed by the single cell. Whereas in the case of multicellular organisms, specialized cells perform different life functions. For example, nerve cells. Next is type of role. Cell has only one role, that is as an individual. In the case of multicellular organism, cell has dual role, as an individual and as well as part of the community. Now, next point is workload. Workload in the case of unicellular organisms, workload on the cell is high because all the functions have to be performed by the single cell. But in the case of multiple cellular organisms, there are multiple cells present. So the workload on the individual cell is very less. Next point is division of labor. As there is only single cell present in the unicellular organism, no division of labor is there. Whereas in the case of multicellular organisms, there are a large number of cells present in the organisms and different cells perform different functions. So division of labor is there in case of multicellular organisms. Next point is survival capacity. Death of the cell results into the death of the organism because it is the single cell which is present in the unicellular organisms. Whereas in the case of multicellular organisms, death of a few cells does not result into the death of the organism. Next point is cell replacement. There is no cell replacement, whereas in the case of multicellular organisms, old and weak cells are continuously replaced by the new cells. Examples of unicellular organisms are bacteria, amoeba, yeast, etc. Whereas in the case of multicellular organism, examples are some fungi, animals and plants. Now the topic before us is shape and size of the cells. The cells of different living organisms may differ in shape and size. We have already seen that example of a unicellular organism is amoeba. Amoeba has no definite shape. Its shape may be just like this at one event, and the other time its shape may be this one. It keeps on changing its shape. Within a multicellular organisms, there are a variety of cells. The cells may be blood cells, muscle cells, nerve cells. Some cells are long, other cells are short. Some cells are circular, whereas the other cells are oval shaped. The size and shape of the cells are related to the specific function they perform. A nerve cell is long and branched as it has to transmit signals throughout the body. On the other hand, the muscle cell is small and spindle shaped, which helps in movement. The red blood cells in the case of human beings are spherical. The components of the cell are enclosed in a membrane, which is known as cell membrane. The cell membrane provides shape to the cells of plants and animals. Then in the case of plant cells, there is an additional covering for the cell membrane, which is known as cell wall. Cell wall is present in the case of plant cells. Cell wall provides shape and rigidity to these cells. Now the question arises, what is the size of the cells? The size of the cells in the living organisms may be very, very small, as a micrometer or micron, or may be as large as a few centimeters. The smallest cell is in bacteria, and the largest cell is the egg of an ostrich. The size of the cell has no relation with the size of the body of the animal or plant. It means that we should not think that if the size of the plant or animal is big, the size of the cell present inside it will be very big. The cells in the elephant, it is not necessary that the cells in the elephant be much bigger than those in a rat. The size of the cell is related to its function. For example, nerve cells both in the elephant and rat are long and branched. The nerve cells perform the same function in the elephant and rat, that is the transferring of messages. Now the next point is division of labor in multicellular organisms. There is division of labor in multicellular organisms such as human beings. This means that different parts of the human body perform different functions. A human body has a heart to pump blood. A human body has a stomach to digest food, and so on. Similarly, division of labor is also seen within a single cell. Each cell has got certain specific components. That is, some components are present inside the cell which are known as cell organelles. Each kind of cell organelle performs a specific function which may include making new materials in the cell, whereas some other cell organelle is related to clearing up waste material from the cell, and so on. A cell is able to live and perform its functions because of the cell organelles present inside it. These organelles together constitute the basic unit called the cell. Now, what is the structure of the cell? The word cell has been taken from the Latin word cellula, which means small room. Cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. If we study a cell under a microscope, we would come across three features almost in every cell. There is a plasma membrane, and there is a nucleus, and there is cytoplasm, which is the fluid present throughout the cell. We can also say that the cell consists of three parts. First is cell membrane, the second is nucleus, and the third is cytoplasm. Within this cytoplasm lies extremely small but distinct structures called organelles, which may be present here and there. Some organelles such as nucleus and Golgi apparatus are usually solitary. Solitary means single. While there are other cell organelles such as mitochondria, chloroplasts, peroxisomes, lysosomes, which can be numerous, that is hundreds to thousands. Now, the question before us is cell organelles. An organelle is a structure found in the cytoplasm that has a specific form and functions. This is the picture of a cell, and there are many cell organelles which you can see are there. The name organelle comes from the idea that these structures are parts of the cell as organs are to the body. It means that as a body has organs, in the same way a cell has small organs which are known as organelles. These are the parts of the cell. Cell organelles are membrane bound structures within a cell. You can see here that these are the cell organelles. These are all cell organelles. These are membrane bound structures within a cell. In prokaryotes, the membrane bound cell organelles and a defined nuclear region are absent. It means that in the case of prokaryotes, membrane bound cell organelles are not present and there is no definite nuclear region. But in the case of eukaryotic cells, they have nuclear membrane as well as membrane enclosed organelles. Some important examples of cell organelles are nucleus, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, mitochondria, vacuole is not appearing as such. Ribosomes, you can see here ribosomes. These are the ribosomes, these small points. The cell organelles are important because they carry out some very crucial functions in a cell. Some of these organelles are visible only with an electron microscope. Large organelles such as nucleus and vacuoles are easily visible with the light microscope. Cell wall, as already told, is present only in the case of animal cells and is not present in the animal cells. It is only present in plant cells. The chloroplasts are also found only in the case of plant cells because they are involved in the making of chlorophyll. Lysosomes is found in the case of, these are the lysosomes. These are found in the case of animal cells. Now, plasma membrane. The plasma membrane is also known as cell membrane or cytoplasmic membrane. It is a biological membrane that surrounds the cytoplasm. This is the cytoplasm all here and there. And cytoplasm is covered by this cell membrane. This is the cell membrane which is of black color. It separates the contents of the cell from outer side, material outside the cell. You can see here that this wall keeps all the cell organelles within the cell. It holds the contents of the cell in place. This cell membrane or plasma membrane is known as is semi-permeable and selectively permeable. It means that it can either let a substance pass through freely, pass through to a limited extent, or not pass through at all. It means that it does not allow each and every type of liquid or gas to freely pass through it. It is semi-permeable. It may allow some gases or liquids to pass through it, or it may not allow at all, or it may allow only to a some restricted extent. It is called selectively permeable because it allows only selected substances to enter and leave the cell. For the examples of substances may be oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water. It prevents what it means plasma membrane prevents the movement of other substances. It does not allow cytoplasm. These cytoplasm is not visible here. All this is cytoplasm in here inside the cell. So cell membrane does not allow the cytoplasm to move out of the cell. In animals, plasma membrane is the outer covering of the cell, while in plants and prokaryotes, it is usually covered by a cell wall, which is the outer covering outside the cell membrane. If now the question arises, what will happen if this plasma membrane breaks down or ruptures? What will happen? There will be free movement of all these substances in and out of the cell. The contents of the cell, that is the cell organelles, whether these are mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, nucleus, or ribosomes, all the contents of the cell, and also the liquid which is present inside the cell, that is the cytoplasm, in which all these cell organelles travel or move, will leak out, and the cell will not be able to perform basic functions. We can say that if this is the cell wall, a plasma membrane, and it breaks, all the parts which are present inside which will go out, all the material which may be present may move in, and the cell will not be able to perform the functions, and such a cell with broken down plasma membrane or ruptured down plasma membrane will die. What is plasma membrane? It is flexible. It is made up of protein and lipid molecules. However, we can observe the structure of the plasma membrane only through an electron microscope. We cannot see the structure of the plasma membrane with our naked eye. We will have to take the help of electron microscope. If you like our video, please like, share, and subscribe our channel. Thank you.